Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that can be a little bit intimidating for some folks. We're going to be talking about the U.S. visa interview.
Yeah,
And for anyone out there who is hoping to travel to the U.S. someday, the visa interview, it's a crucial step.
it really is.
And to help us kind of navigate this topic, we're actually going to be using a really interesting and unexpected source. We found this great English learning podcast, and it actually had a whole episode about the U.S. visa interview.
It's funny how these things pop up. Sometimes you find really practical advice in the most unexpected places.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, our mission is to take what we learned from this podcast and share it with you guys. We really want to break down what it takes to nail that visa interview. And while we're going to be focusing mostly on the B2 tourist visa, I think a lot of the insights that we're going to talk about today apply to other visa types as well.
Absolutely. The underlying principles are very similar.
So one thing that this podcast did that I thought was really smart was they framed the visa interview as a test.
Yeah.
A test to prove that you'll return to your home country. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's really helpful to think about it that way because it highlights the importance of understanding what the interviewer is looking for. And what they're looking for is to see that you have strong ties to your home country that will compel you to return after your visit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about tricking anyone. It's about proving that you have those strong ties.
Right. So it's less about convincing them that you're, worthy of coming to the U.S. and more about proving that you're not going to overstay your visa.
Exactly.
Now, the podcast used this really great analogy to explain this. They compared it to a rope.
Yeah, I liked that.
And that each tie that you have to your home country, so things like your job, your family, your house, whatever it might be, is like a strand in that rope.
Yeah, and the more strands you have, the stronger your rope is and the harder it is to break. And that gives the interviewer more confidence that you're going to return.
Yeah, and that's what you want, right? You want to have a nice, strong rope that shows the interviewer that you're going to be coming back home.
Exactly.
I love that analogy. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get into the specifics here. What are some of the key questions that they're going to ask you in this interview?
Well, one of the very first questions that they almost always ask is about your destination and purpose. Where are you going in the United States and what will you be doing there? It seems simple enough, right?
Yeah, it sounds pretty straightforward, but I'm sure that there are some nuances to it.
Yeah, you don't want to just give a one-word answer. The podcast actually gave this great example. They said, imagine that you're going to visit your brother in Minneapolis for the arrival of a new baby.
Okay.
That is much more specific and convincing than just saying visiting family.
Right, and I think it kind of paints a picture in the interviewer's mind, right?
Yeah.
It gives them context.
Exactly. And it also helps establish a timeline. They can see that you're going for a specific event and that you're likely to return home once that event is over.
Right, okay, so the takeaway there is to be specific. Give them the details.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got specific travel plans. Check. What's next? What else are they going to ask?
They're also going to ask how long you plan to remain in the United States.
Okay.
This one can actually be a little bit tricky because it seems easy, but your answer has to perfectly match the information that you put on your visa application.
Ah, so you can't just wing it.
Not at all. Any inconsistency, even if it's seemingly small or insignificant, is going to raise a red flag.
Got it. Stick to the plan.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on to, I think, maybe what is the most important and probably the scariest question for a lot of people. Tell me about the ties you have to your home country.
Yeah, this is the big one. And this is where that rope analogy really comes into play.
Right, because this is how they're going to assess how likely you are to overstay your visa.
Exactly. So you really need to think about all of the things that are tying you to your home country and be able to articulate them clearly. The podcast gave a bunch of good examples like having a house, a job, a car, limited vacation time from work.
Now, what if someone doesn't own a house or a car? Like maybe they're renting or they use public transport. Does that mean that their rope is automatically weaker?
Not necessarily. It's really about presenting the full picture. If you're renting, you can talk about how long you've lived there, the fact that you plan to return to that residence, and even things like your involvement in your community or your strong social network. Those can all be considered strong ties.
So it's more about showing that you have a stable life back home, whatever that looks like for you. It doesn't have to be about owning a lot of things.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm starting to get a better sense of how this all works.
And we also need to talk about financial independence and assets.
Okay, let's dig into that.
Being financially independent basically means that you can support yourself during your trip. You're not going to be relying on U.S. resources.
Right.
And assets? Those are things that you own back home that add extra weight to that rope we were talking about.
Gotcha. So things like a house or investments or savings.
Exactly.
Okay.
And speaking of being prepared, the podcast told this really funny story about a friend who brought a huge file of documents to their interview.
Wait, hold on. We have to hear this. So this friend with the giant stack of papers at their visa interview, what happened?
Well, they brought basically everything they could think of. Bank statements, property deeds, letters of recommendation, the whole 9 yards. And, it turns out not all of that was strictly necessary, but it definitely left an impression.
Yeah, I bet. It kind of sends the message that you are serious about returning home. Like, I have a whole life here.
Exactly. It just shows that you're prepared, that you're organized, and that you're really committed to this whole process.
Right.
And, speaking of being prepared, I think it's worth diving a little bit deeper into this idea of being financially independent. What does that actually mean in the context of applying for a visa?
Yeah, because anyone can say that they can support themselves, but proving it, that's a different story.
Right. You have to actually show them the money, so to speak.
Right.
So things like recent bank statements that show that you have enough money to cover your trip, maybe credit card statements, or even a letter from your employer confirming your salary. Those are all good things to have.
So basically, you're showing them that you're not going to be a financial burden on the U.S. government.
Exactly. You're there to visit, maybe do some shopping, see the sights, but you're not going to be looking for a handout.
Right.
And this also ties back into the assets that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
We mentioned house or investments, but what about some less obvious assets? What are some other things that people could highlight?
Yeah, because not everyone owns a home or has a big stock portfolio or anything like that. So what else could they bring to the table?
Well, think about anything that you have that ties you to your home country. That's a value. It could be a family business that you're involved in, maybe some valuable personal possessions like family heirlooms, or even intellectual property like patents or copyrights. Those can all be considered assets.
Oh, wow. I never even thought about those things. So it really is just about demonstrating that you have this rich and established life back home. It doesn't have to look a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. And, while you might not need to bring documentation for every single asset that you have, it never hurts to have it on hand just in case.
Right.
It just shows that you're organized and you have nothing to hide.
Okay, I'm with you.
So, we've talked a lot about proving that you'll return home, but what about showing that you're excited about visiting the United States? Do you think that that matters at all?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, they do want to see that you're genuinely interested in being there, right? Whether it's for tourism or visiting family or whatever your reason for going might be.
Exactly. The interviewer wants to see that you're enthusiastic about the trip and that you have a genuine reason for wanting to be there.
So how do you strike that balance? Like, how do you show them that you're excited about the visit, but that you're even more excited to come back home?
Well, it's all about the way you frame your answers. You want to highlight both your enthusiasm for the trip itself, but also emphasize your commitment to your home country.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of just listing off, all the sites that you want to see, you could talk about how you're looking forward to, exploring a certain city, but that you also can't wait to get back home and share all your experiences with your friends and family.
So you're kind of weaving in that personal connection. You're reminding them that you have people and things waiting for you back home.
Exactly. And it's those little details that can make a big difference. And it's not just about what you say, it's also about how you say it.
Oh, you mean like body language and stuff like that?
Exactly. Make sure to make eye contact, sit up straight, speak clearly and confidently. Think of it more as a conversation rather than an interrogation.
Which is easier said than done when you're under pressure. So do you have any tips for staying calm?
The best thing you can do is practice. Do some mock interviews with a friend or family member.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Get comfortable answering those common questions. Anticipate potential follow-up questions.
So like rehearse, but don't memorize a whole script?
Right, exactly. You want to sound natural and genuine.
Got it.
The interviewer wants to get to know the real you, not some, rehearsed robot.
Right.
And remember that the interviewer is just doing their job. They're not out to get you. They're just trying to assess your situation.
Okay, that's actually really helpful.
Yeah.
Like shifting your mindset to view it as a conversation rather than an interrogation, I think can really help take some of the pressure off.
Absolutely. And if you do find yourself getting flustered, it's okay to pause, take a breath, gather your thoughts, and then answer the question.
That's good advice. Better to take a moment than to just start rambling.
Right.
Now, what about those curveball questions? The ones that kind of come out of nowhere? How do you prepare for that?
Those are tough. Those are designed to kind of see how you think on your feet and how you respond to unexpected situations.
So what's the best way to handle those?
Well, the most important thing is to just stay calm. Think logically. Rely on the information that you know about your own situation. And remember that there's not always a right or wrong answer. It's more about demonstrating your thought process and your ability to articulate your reasoning.
So it's almost like a problem-solving exercise in a way.
Exactly. And if you genuinely don't understand the question, it's okay to ask for clarification. It's better to be sure than to just stumble through an answer based on assumptions.
Right.
Clarity over confusion.
I like that. Okay, so before we wrap things up for this part of our deep dive, I wanted to touch on something else that the podcast mentioned, and that was about tailoring your preparation to your specific visa category.
Oh, yeah, that's really important. Every visa type has its own unique set of requirements and documentation needs.
Right. So a student who's applying for an F1 visa is going to have different things to consider than someone who's applying for a B2 tourist visa.
Exactly. So you really need to do your research beforehand. Don't just rely on general advice. Make sure you're looking into the specific requirements for your particular situation.
So it's like studying for an exam. The more you know, the less you have to worry about.
Exactly.
Okay, so research, preparation, and lots of deep breathing. Anything else that we should keep in mind?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the visa interview is more than just a hurdle that you have to clear. It's actually an opportunity for you to share your story, to connect with the interviewer on a human level, and to really demonstrate your genuine intentions.
It's about building trust.
Exactly. So just take a deep breath, review your materials, and you'll do great.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. And in part 3, we're going to reveal some common mistakes that you should avoid and some insider tips to help you truly ace that visa interview. Okay, deep divers, welcome back. We are ready to wrap up our deep dive into the wild world of U.S. visa interviews. So far, we've talked about all those important ties to your home country, getting your finances in order, even telling your story in a way that resonates with the interviewer.
And now we're going to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about avoiding those common pitfalls that can trip people up.
Right, because even with the best preparation, there are some classic mistakes that people make that can really hurt their chances.
Absolutely.
So let's hear, what are some of those interview landmines that we should be looking out for?
Well, one of the biggest ones is not being able to articulate your ties to your home country clearly. This is the foundation of your whole case.
Right. It's not enough to just say, I have a house and a job. You need to connect the dots. You need to help the interviewer understand why those things mean that you'll definitely be coming back.
Exactly. So practice summarizing your ties in a way that's both compelling and easy to understand. Imagine that the interviewer asks you, why should we believe you'll return home after your visit? Have a strong answer ready to go.
Okay, so have your elevator pitch ready. What other blunders should we be trying to avoid?
Inconsistency is a big one. Remember how we talked about your answer about the length of stay needing to match your application perfectly?
Right.
That attention to detail applies to everything.
So if you say you're staying with a friend, but your application says a hotel, that's a red flag.
Big red flag.
Yeah.
Because it makes the interviewer question the validity of everything that you're saying.
Right. And you don't want that.
No, not at all. Be consistent. Your travel dates, purpose of your visit, everything.
Got it. Consistency is key. Now, this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but what about being too prepared? Is it possible to sound too rehearsed?
Yeah, that's a great question. You definitely don't want to go overboard with scripting your answers because the interviewer wants to see the real you. They don't want to talk to a robot.
So it's finding that balance, right, between being prepared but also being genuine.
Exactly. So know the key points that you want to convey and then let them flow naturally during the conversation.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about some proactive things that people can do, some tips for making a really good impression.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best things you can do is tailor your preparation to your specific visa category. Don't just rely on general advice. Do your research.
So if I'm a student who's applying for an F1 visa, I should really dig into the specifics of that visa type.
Exactly. Look into the requirements. What kind of documentation do they typically ask for? The more you know going in, the better prepared you'll be and the more confident you'll feel.
Yeah, it's like anything else in life. The more you know, the less you have to worry about. What else?
When it comes to documentation, think presentation. Organize everything neatly. Use clear labels. Make it easy for the interviewer to find what they're looking for.
It's like you're building your case, and each document is a piece of evidence.
Perfect analogy. And speaking of presenting yourself well, let's talk about attire. Now you don't need to wear a full suit, but something business casual is always a safe bet.
Yeah, first impressions matter.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the clothes. Maintain good eye contact. Sit up straight. Project confidence.
I'm feeling more confident already. Any final words of wisdom as we send our listeners off into the interview battlefield?
Just remember that the visa interview is more than just a hurdle to overcome. It's a chance to share your story and your dreams, to connect with another human being and let them see who you really are.
It's a chance to really shine.
Exactly. So take a deep breath. Believe in yourself. You got this.
And remember, deep divers, the world is full of amazing experiences just waiting to be had. And we hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and the confidence to chase after those experiences. Happy travels, everyone.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.